Brian Rose from London Real. This week we have Jake Wood in the house. He is a Territorial Army soldier for the UK. He spent 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. He used to train right here at the Honourable Artillery Company, the HAC, right here in Shoreditch, where London Real Studios is. The weird thing is he used to hang out in all the bars around here. He was in banking like I was for I think 10 years, and yet that's where the similarities stop. This guy has PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, in a big way. You know, he was shaking for a lot of the interview. He just recently released some of his helmet cam footage from his tour in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's very heavy stuff. The guy's obviously been affected by his tour. He's just come out with this book called Among You, and he has a lot of very real stories to talk about, including his part in the killing of an Afghani, and he talked a little bit about some of the guys that were in his platoon that got killed. I think he's got a really interesting story and a real genuine tale, so I hope you enjoy that. As you know, we're sponsored by the guys at Hover. They are a domain name registration company that do business in the right way. We like their style, we like their service. They give you the Who Is privacy service, which basically keeps your address details confidential for free. I've just found out about their valet service, which means you can transfer your domain name from whoever you have it registered with over to them, and they give you an extra free year for $10. So it's a cool service, and as you know, they support podcasts like ours that talk about things like PTSD and ayahuasca, and not always the most popular topics that we talk about, Rogan talks about. So we just really appreciate their support. If you want to go check them out, go to hover.com. If you want to save 10%, put a /London Real in there, and just check them out. They've just given out a free URL for the best quote this week, and then they gave out another one to somebody who said they had done the same quote. So they're that cool. You can follow them on Twitter at @Hover. We are also sponsored by the guys at On It Labs. Yes, it's Alpha Brain. You know I always carry it with me. I'm on it right now. I take 1 on most days, 2 on the other good days. The guys, Aubrey Marcus and Joe Rogan, made some good products over there. I love the Shroom Tech Sport, the Hemp Force Protein, all that good stuff you can get. Go to londonreal.tv, click on the banner ad, and it'll take you to On It Labs, and go crazy, do some shopping. As usual, contact me on email at info@londonreal.tv. Come check us out on Twitter. We're going to be doing a Q&A with Jake Wood on Reddit this week on Tuesday night. So please come in with your questions for him. Also, we're giving out 5 copies of his signed book to the best tweets quoted from the episode. Put the quote in there, put on the Biddy link, and we'll pick out the best 5 and send you his book. So it's a very serious dude with a serious topic. I really hope you enjoyed Jake. He was really honest. He was obviously been through a lot of shit, and he was reliving a lot of it in the studio. So I appreciate his honesty, and now here's Mr. Jake Wood. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. With me today is Mr. Matthew Sullick, and our guest is Mr. Jake Wood, who was a British Territorial Army Reserve soldier who was served in 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and was later diagnosed with PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. He's written a book called Among You, which is the extraordinary true story of a soldier broken by war. It was published last month, I think, and it's available on Amazon. It's quite a read, and we're going to talk all about it today. Jake, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. You know, I've had a lot of guests in here, and to be honest, everyone and their mother has a book, and a lot of them are just kind of a crappy self-published book. But when you sent me a copy of this, I was like, okay, wait a second. This is a real book, by a real publisher. You spent a lot of time writing this. It's really personal. I didn't have a chance to read every page, but I got through a lot of it and getting into my head. It's actually really descriptive the way it's written,
Thank you.
It seems like you put a lot of time in this. Before we get to the book, I was wondering if you could give the people that don't know just a rough background as far as how you first got into the military, what it was like being a reservist, and some of your tours, just so we can know a bit more about you.
Okay, I think it was almost like preordained that I would join the forces in one form or another. That I came I was raised in a military family, and my dad was an RAF pilot. My mum was in the army. My uncle was in the army. My aunt was in the army. My cousin was in the army, and like towering above all of them was my grandfather, who was he fought in both World Wars. I lied about his age, to fight in the First World War, and multi-decorated military cross, etc. And I was brought up in this family environment which revered achievement in the military world. So, yeah, with how I was nurtured, I think it was pretty much preordained that I would do something with the military. But then, I went to school, I was in the cadets and that kind of thing, and then I went to university. And whilst I was at university, I heard about this thing called the TA, which is the Territorial Army, the Army Reserves. And I kind of heard about them, before, but I saw that you could join the TA and do all the good bits of the army, all the exciting bits, without having to do them all kind of humdrum, boring bits in between that barracks life, for a regular soldier it often involves. So I joined the TA whilst I was at university. It was what the army calls an airborne unit, so it was paratrooping and all good stuff like that. And then I kind of enjoyed it. I was in a good unit, and I didn't really want to give that up. And I saw that I could stay in a civilian job on a civilian wage, which is sometimes higher than in the military, and I could do all the good bits of the army, that I wanted to at weekends. So I could have a sort of a military yang, to my office-bound yin, and everything was in kind of harmony, really. I could blow off steam at the weekend, shoot guns and get rained on and all exciting stuff like that.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah. And then, during the Monday to Friday, as a routine, I could earn a a semi-decent wage. And so everything was pretty cool, really. Everything was, I felt quite happy with that existence, but that all changed in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq, which is where the book picks up.
And what year had you started with the reserves?
I first joined them in 1994.
Kind of after college or after university?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you'd been there for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was cool. And then I transferred to a different unit. I want to move to London. And it was from that unit that I was mobilised for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Yeah.
So that kind of the Americans and George Bush kind of really changed everything up for you. Because if that hadn't happened, you might have continued with this kind of weekend warrior type of, banking and by day and reservist by weekend kind of thing.
A lot of people say George Bush has got a lot to answer for. I think as far as I'm concerned, he's got a lot to answer for, but also in a bizarre way, I've got a lot to thank him for as well. And that sounds contradictory, but there you go.
What do you have to thank him for?
No, it's going to be controversial, but most soldiers want to go to war, and this may sound unpalatable, but unfortunately, it's the truth. Most soldiers, when they join up, they want to do this thing called living the dream in Army terminology, which is essentially doing soldiering for real. Most soldiers who join what are called teeth arms, the combat roles, they want to experience combat for real. They want someone to shoot at them, and they want to shoot back at them, and because that's a soldier's raison d'etre. That's his whole reason for being a soldier. And I can understand this. This might sound unpalatable for some of the public, but I'm afraid it's true.
Makes total sense to me. Was that you for 8-9 years? Were you always kind of I want to try this stuff out?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you got the news that the Yanks were going in, you were like, yeah, let's go, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, my views have like changed now. With retrospect, I can look back to the way I tried to like justify why I was there. I can look back on those reasons as naive, but at that time, I was desperate to go, as an awful lot of soldiers were, and when I got the call up, I was. Again, it sounds unpalatable, but I'm afraid it's the truth. I was literally almost, sort of punching the air, sort of thing. I can look back on that now and think about it a little differently. So, with the retrospect I've been afforded now, though,
All things being the same, would you change that? What happened in 03?
I can't. I think that way even more madness lies.
By contemplating that, yeah. I know
Yeah,
what you mean. I know what
yeah.
you mean. It's sometimes that's a question I ask at the end.
No, it's okay.
End
No,
of
it's a completely valid question, Brian. But what is done is done, and no matter what we've done in our lives, we have to be able to accept it and learn from it. And then, one of the reasons I wrote the book was because I wanted to try and channel the destruction of my past into something constructive for my present, and thereby hopefully enable a different future for myself. So the book was kind of cathartic, but also in talking about the PTSD, I wanted to try and raise awareness in the public about exactly what PTSD is and how it's affecting an increasing number of soldiers now, because a lot of them are leaving the forces now, and we live among you now.
Yeah, I want to talk more about it because it's an acronym people throw around a lot, and I feel like people throw it around a lot without really understanding it, and I want to get into more detail about that later. But I just wanted to find just a bit like timeline so people can kind of get their head around where you were and when, over from 03 up until I think it was 07 or 08. The thing that struck me about this book is that I worked in banking for like 10 years. I've hung out in the same bars that Jake used to hang out here in Shoreditch. I mean, that's where he used to hang, right around here. And I must have walked by the HAC, which is the Honorable Artillery Company. It's right here on City Road. It's right next to the Virgin Gym. I must have walked by that 1,000 times. And I see the guys down there drilling, and I don't know, I never think much about it. I walk right by them. But that's pretty much where our similarities seem to change.
Yeah.
And I saw some of your helmet cam footage you had on Facebook, and it was very serious stuff. I found even some of the footage of the young children over there and stuff almost more riveting than some of the other stuff, because I hadn't seen that kind of close contact. But back to my question, can you just walk us through a timeline? So like 03, how long were you there for? When did you come back?
Okay. I was mobilised for invasion in February 03, and then we invaded a few weeks later, and I was in Iraq for about 3 or 4 months, and then I came back to the bank I was working for at that time in Canary Wharf. I worked there for about another 6 months as a system analyst, and then I was called up again, to go back to Iraq in very early 2004, and I was away from the office then for just over a year. It's actually about 14 months. And 6 months of that was spent in Iraq doing surveillance on Iraqi insurgents. I came back home again, and I was back home for another 2 years, and then I was called up again for Afghanistan in 2007. Spent another year away from the office then, 6 months of which was summer of 07 in Afghanistan, Helmand, fighting season in Afghanistan, and then I came back and I went back to the office, and that's when I realised that things weren't right upstairs. With that's when I started having symptoms that I would be later educated in were the symptoms of PTSD. You know?
Would you say that every time you got called up, was your mind already changing as you were getting called up? Every tour, would you say that you're already seeing the effects of war on your mind?
I think with the tours, they kind of increased in intensity with each one. Mm-hmm. So my most sort of active tour, like militarily, was like definitely Afghanistan. But I think even when I came back from my first tour, I knew that it was almost like I realised that everything, the only thing that had changed was me. So I came back from that tour, and all of a sudden I'd had this taste of this otherworldly existence, where this might sound strange to some, civilian viewers, and listeners, but it was like, for me, it was a very moral existence. If you take away the reasons, why the soldiers are there, soldiers they'll justify to themselves, before they go, why they're going there, as in why they might soon die. But once they're actually on the ground, they're not thinking about politics, right, or what David Cameron or George Bush or Barack Obama thinks about X, Y, and Z. It's completely irrelevant at that point. They're just concentrating on the job they're doing on the ground and looking after the man next to them, and that man next to them looks after them. And it's very, you have to be very, very unselfish as a soldier. You need to, there's this thing called the buddy-buddy system, and I've just explained it. You look after the man next to you and he looks after you. And if you don't do that, the whole system falls down. I did not see that in banking when I came back.
Maybe you didn't look hard enough.
And that made coming home each time harder and harder, because I was trying to readjust to this environment which was so alien to the normality that I left behind in Iraq or Afghanistan. And each time I came back, it was harder and harder, to readjust this skyscrapered environment where, from my perspective at least, there seemed to be too many people just looking after themselves, and that was it. And so each and every time I was called up, I was like, cool, I'm going, because it was like returning. It was almost like returning home.
Just to like this kind of brotherhood and this like,
absolutely.
And it's a place where you didn't have, I guess a lot of your questions are answered because you always know that guy will have your back. Your job is to have his back. Yeah. So is that what you mean when you say it's morally clear? Because you...
Yeah, it's like, yes, it's a very... It could be viewed as a very simple, black and white existence. I mean, like brutally simple, literally, where all of a sudden your existence is like pared down to this sort of what it can be like a life and death like struggle, and it's during one day you can be fighting for your life and the lives of those beside you, and it's just you look after each other, and when you come back to banking, no one's going to die. You might have your project manager like breathing down your neck, like screaming for this report or whatever, but you know that no one's going to die if it's a few hours late or something. And I just found it very, very hard to come back to.
Is it hard to take seriously when you come back?
Yeah.
But which one of those states of being is natural? Because you could argue that neither one is, because you can't live 24/7 your whole life in a situation of like life and death, or even for a short amount of time, as you probably experienced.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even though there must be some great comfort as that, it's just knowing that your job is to protect your fellow tribe, and they're protecting you. And when you come back to the real world, especially in an urban environment like London, where nobody gives a fuck, and it's just everyone out for themselves, especially in banking.
Yeah.
Is one more natural than the other, or do you think that they're just two extremes of life?
They're probably two extremes. They've got to be two extremes because I mean, most people don't work in banking, and most people aren't in the army, and and that's why they might find this interesting, because I kind of lived this like duality, which they were just like polar opposites of each other, from my point of view, and I would say that with each tour I did, that life on tour became more and more normal for me, which is why it was harder and harder to readjust, like coming back home each time, which is why also I just wanted to go back on tour each time, because it was returning to a life that made more sense.
Could you have opted out on any of those tours, like the second and third one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I could have. The thing about TA is, until you're mobilised, to go to Iraq or Afghanistan, you're a volunteer, so you can leave the TA at any time you like. And you don't have to, I think you might have to write a letter of resignation or something, but I mean, that's it. We just phone them up and say, I'm leaving now. And
the high was the same that you went the first time or the last time? The high of it when you were going to war? When you were super excited the first time you went?
Yeah.
Would you say you had the same high, or did it come down a bit after realizing everything?
Yeah, I think the first time I didn't know what to expect, because I'd never been on tour before, and I literally did not know what to expect, and it was a bizarre experience. I found myself walking through what was fated to be the Garden of Eden, the birthplace of civilization, and you walk, it's this crazy experience. But then, sorry, can I just actually go back to your question? And
just in terms of how you got super excited about going on the tour the first time, when you compare it to the last time you were called to go, did you still get the same high, or was it a bit more calmed?
I just think I was desperate. I was desperate to go away each time, and then when I think after Afghanistan I had PTSD, and it was at that point that I never ever wanted to go away on tour again, because I'd seen enough, and I'm not asking for sympathy at all. I'm not owed any sympathy, because I made my own decisions, and I have to live by them. People can condemn me as much as I condemn myself with the PTSD. But I essentially volunteered for those tours. So
And did you realize while you were in Afghanistan that you didn't want to do this again, or was it when you got back where you're like, I'm done with this? I
kind of knew that that the third tour would be my last tour. I kind of knew that, but then when the PTSD hit, it was going to be my last tour shitburst. I mean, there was no debating it. It was like, okay, this is the end.
Okay, and those symptoms hit when you got back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We solicited questions on Facebook, and we got a ton of them from you, and for this interview. And you mentioned it was morally clear, like going into Helmand, like that third time. But so many people ask questions about the politics. There were questions of how do you feel getting paid to kill people, that kind of thing. Were there moral issues when you were on the ground in Afghanistan, or were there just not when you're a soldier?
They're always there. I'll talk about Afghanistan, but also, I can remember with the invasion of Iraq, there was this real effort, by the coalition forces, to avoid casualties on every side, not just on our own side and not just Iraqi, civilians, but also guys in the Iraqi army. I remember listening on the radio, and there was a guy in an OP team, observation post team, and he could see this Iraqi convoy of like trucks, moving, and he was asking to bring down a fire mission on it, and basically Hire came down to him and asked him if the convoy was a threat. He said no, and they said no. Okay, don't hit it, because that it would be needless killing, and at that stage, a lot of the Iraqi army was running away. So I've never seen any atrocities myself. It's not to say that they might have happened, but all the guys I served with, no one wanted to. There's no sort of like bloodlust there. It was we just wanted like to do the job for real, and with all its myriad of of like pitfalls and moral ambiguities as to why we're there, but when we're talking about the existence on the ground being a very moral existence, that's just how, for me anyway, how the soldier operates on a day-to-day case with his mates. You look after each other. It's very unselfish, and when I was in Afghanistan, exactly the same thing. There was a real effort to try and avoid civilian casualties as much as possible, as much as we could, and we'd never knowingly target civilians, obviously, but unfortunately we get tarred with the same brush as the Taliban, and the Taliban actually actively target civilians, but everyone seems more interested in tarring us for some reason, so we would never target any areas, even though there might be Taliban in there, where there were civilians.
Okay.
Because you're not going to win any hearts and minds that way, and who wants to kill women and kids? Not me.
What's the difference on the ground, like for like Afghanistan compared to your second tour in Iraq? I mean, just from like, it's so hard for me to get my head as to what it looks like. Was it more of an urban environment in Iraq? Yeah. Was there a different feeling in Iraq as opposed to Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think I mean, certainly I could almost, not contrast my second Iraq tour with my Afghan tour, but comparing the two. My second Iraq tour was just after the invasion finished, and that was when we were in this sort of like peacekeeping phase kind of thing. And we were doing surveillance on the insurgents. That was we were operating in urban environments a lot, and it's like scooting around the streets in like vehicles, and superficially it would seem quite peaceful. But in Iraq, you were basically like driving around waiting to get blown up by an IED. So, for your whole patrol out in a vehicle, not a single thing would happen. It would be like quiet as a mouse. But you're constantly watching out for heaps of rubbish, which could like contain an IED, like dog carcasses, which can like contain an IED. Like different coloured like patches on the road, which like can contain an IED, and you're looking for all these hiding places for improvised explosive devices, and that's pretty stressful because it's if you can almost contrast that with Afghanistan when I was there anyway in the early days before the IED threat was much higher. In Afghanistan when I was there, it was more of a shooting match. It was living the dream as far as the soldiers concerned, where like someone shoots at you and you have control over your own destiny. You can like shoot back at them, so it's almost a level playing field. Driving around in Iraq or when you get blown up by by IEDs, it's you've got very little control over your own destiny there, and that's a very different kind of like stress. And again in Iraq we'd go back to our patrol bases, big like fortified things, but then the insurgents, they rain down fire on them at night, be it like with mortars or like rockets, and again that's quite stressful because no matter how good a soldier you think you may be, you have absolutely no control over where the next mortar will land. It might land over there or it might land on you, and you just have a split second of light and then you're being burst apart.
You described like being rained down by mortars where you just got nowhere to hide and you're just like curled up in trying to get almost inside yourself, and there's just...
Yeah, you go, you find your best bit of like cover, and you, if as you hear it whistle above you, you just crawl into a ball and you just got to hope it doesn't land on you. That's quite stressful.
You had this quote in your book, and I think it was from like the Roman times, like thousands of years ago, where it really struck me. And it was, I think some Roman soldier was saying something like, "Even in peacetime, I am always ready for the next threat." And you said something, and this sounds like IED hunting, and you said that's a bit of what PTSD is like. And can you just explain what that is about?
One of the symptoms of PTSD is this thing called hypervigilance. It's just one of a long list of symptoms. And hypervigilance basically is being constantly on alert for like dangers around you. So and this is a like psychological hang-up or a leftover from being in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where over there your very life would literally depend on constantly being alert, your head on a swivel, looking around you like 360 every second.
Right.
You can't relax because with Sod's Law that it's that second that you relax where you miss something and that could kill you. So you're constantly primed out there when you're on patrol for all the dangers around you, and with PTSD that state of mind is like seared into your brain, and you find that it comes home with you. And so even now I find it difficult to walk along the street and have someone walking behind me. I can't do it. I have to like stop, let them go past me, or walk across the street, or even being on the underground. Like guys with backpacks, so I have to stand as close as I can to them and watch their hands. And because I'm thinking about suicide bombers
To see if they're gonna fire something off or reach inside or.
Again, exactly, and it's something about the soldier's mentality, I think, where you don't want to get away from the threat. It's almost like you want to do something about it. So I'll try and stand as close as I can, like to these people, and I'm watching their hands, and if I make a sudden move for it, then I'd make a sudden move for them.
Have you had confrontations on the back of this hypervigilance? Have you had people like, "What are you looking at?" Or
no, I try and do it surreptitiously because otherwise you're just gonna create trouble. And no, I've not trouble yet.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I just wonder how it might manifest itself. All those.
Not overtly, things. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm not like sort of like standing in their face or anything like that. I mean that'd just be like crazy. I'm not that crazy, I don't think.
And what is? I mean, I know from the book, you've been in treatment for the PTSD. I mean, what do they advise on a daily basis for you to do to try to work yourself out of these things? Do they promote meditation, or does any of that stuff really work, in your opinion?
There's all kinds of lines of treatment, and I could reel off a lot of acronyms now, but there's cognitive behaviour therapy, which is basically like talking about it. Essentially it's like exposure therapy. So the theory is that the more you talk about something in like forensic detail, you describe exactly what you were doing like during this like traumatic experience, what you can see, what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste, and you're literally forcing your brain to relive that traumatic experience. And the theory is that by forcing the brain to relive it, as masochistic as it sounds, and as like counterintuitive as it sounds, you're forcing the brain to process this memory, because essentially what the flashbacks and the nightmares, they're like quarantine memories that the brain has locked away in a different part of your brain, like deep down in your subconscious, because at the time of the trauma, the brain is basically like shut off emotionally, and like subconsciously it's basically gone, okay, that's too much. I'm shutting off all emotion, like connected, like to that experience. I'm quarantining that. that's repressed. And once that happens, this is what the this much vaunted expression, the 1,000-yard stare, is. That's the emotional shutdown.
Okay.
The brain's just emotionally shut down, and it said, okay, enough. And operating mechanically as a soldier, you can still do what some people still can do in that state, but operating mechanically as a soldier is often all you can do in that state.
You talked about cognitive therapy. Another thing I've read a lot about that is they say writing it down can even take it to like the next level. And I was wondering if that's why you wrote, and if you find that writing these descriptions, because apparently once you write it down, your brain relives it and kind of deals with it and puts it away.
Yeah, that was definitely another reason I wrote the book. Is it was an attempt at catharsis to try and process the past and make sense of it, and because I want to get better. I mean, who wants to constantly be reliving the past with flashbacks and nightmares all the time? So that was like definitely a reason one of the reasons I wrote the book, and I think again I was naive, though. To think it would just be a magic wand. I think it has helped, but it hasn't been a magic wand. I mean. But having said that, I don't know how I'd be if I hadn't wrote the book. So I might be.
Did you ever think
about 6 feet under now or something,
Did you ever think about not publishing it? Like last year, were you ever like, I'm just not going to do this? Or did you have to get it out there?
I had to get it out there because I wanted, I don't want to force my story down the throats of anyone. It's up to anyone, whether they watch this or whether they read my book. And but I wanted to try and raise awareness of what PTSD is, as well as what the reality is actually out there on the ground.
I mean, this is 5 years now since you came back from Afghanistan. Is that right?
Yeah.
Have you gotten better or worse, or how would you say is your health, mental, physical, everything?
Good question. I think it's still there.
Just talking about it make it more difficult? I mean, it seems...
It's okay. It's okay talking about abstract concepts.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. If you... I did a radio interview yesterday. I won't say the radio station.
It's all right. No big deal. We love other media.
And they interviewed some experts on like PTSD, and they said, right, okay, and now we're going to talk to like two guys who have PTSD. And then just before they did that, they briefly explained what PTSD was again. They said you have nightmares and intrusive memories and flashbacks about things like this. And then all of a sudden, with no warning, and when I was wearing headphones, all of a sudden, with no warning, they just piped screaming audio of an Afghan firefight with Ranscoff and explosions and people screaming like peel back and all kinds of stuff. And then I'd take the headphones off because I was just like, I knew that if I listened to that, I wouldn't be able to talk on the radio program afterwards, because it's like triggers like that, or not even like that, with just like a door slamming.
Yeah.
Do you like being introduced to someone who suffers from PTSD, or do you hate that? And how do you describe PTSD to people? Two questions there.
Sorry, to go back to your question, I've rambled a bit, I'm sorry. I don't mind.
Okay.
I don't mind the label, because I accept that it's part of me now. I think you have to accept it, to be able to to make something of your life. And it's like knowing your enemy almost, in like soldiers' terminology. And I don't mind the label because I just want to play my small part in raising awareness of what so many soldiers are going through now, and like so many actually aren't putting their hands up because they're worried about losing their careers and that kind of thing. So I don't mind the label, and I'm sorry one of the things that has been affected is my memory. So, what was the second part of the question, please?
If people come up and just ask you quite plainly, what is PTSD? How do you describe it to them?
It's like living with the past. It's the past lives on in you, and it's and when you re-experience the past with flashbacks or with nightmares, in your mind at least, it isn't the past because it feels so so very real. It's actually happening to you all over again. You can see it again. You can hear it. You can feel it. So it's like the ghosts of the past are still with you. Particularly with the guys who died, and it's just I'm okay with it now. So I'm okay with it now. I mean, I've made room for the ghosts, and I accept that for the moment at least that's all I can do. And but certainly before I was getting like psychological help, it was absolutely terrifying. But because I didn't know exactly what was wrong with me, I would I'd be like sitting in that bank, and I'd be sitting in a meeting with like a conference call with like Hong Kong or someone like speaking about some IT system, and then I would hear screams for medic, and that's I'll admit that's very, very frightening, because it's not just recalling a very frightening experience, it's also frightening because you're not in control of your mind. Mm-hmm. And as soldiers, you've been drilled you've been drilled that the mind rules the body, not the body rules the mind. And when when you're doing all the physical stuff, you'll have this, you might have like some of the instructors screaming this mantra at you or whatever, or you'll have it through going through your head, and it's all about like pushing on, and but then with PTSD, all of a sudden you realise that you're not in control of your own mind, and that's quite, I think that's frightening from my experience for a soldier to admit to, because it's almost like an admission of weakness, and as soldiers you're sort of trained to be as strong as you can be individually in yourselves. I might be rambling again. I'm sorry.
Not at all.
Okay.
I think it's really important that we let you express all of these opinions. I mean, that's why I think this format's really good to talk to you, because, Jesus, a 10-minute interview doesn't really do the subject justice. And I know Matt's got a few questions, and I want to hear his questions. I just wanted to know, were you checked in for treatment when you came back? I read a bit part of the book where you were, and I just wondered if you could describe what kind of treatment you went through.
Yeah.
With the Army.
I put my hand up very, very soon when I got back, when I realised that I wasn't right, because
it's like 08, 09. You were back in 08?
Yeah.
Okay.
Early 2008, I went back to the bank, and within a few weeks, even the bank realised that I couldn't do my job.
And it was like the screams, like the audible things that weren't there.
Absolutely.
Did you have nightmares too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
any other way it manifested itself?
Flashbacks.
While you're conscious, while you're awake.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Intrusive memories. Nightmares and
is it very specific events, and were those events only in Afghanistan, or would you actually flash back to the second tour in Iraq as well?
No, it's definitely Afghanistan.
Okay.
Definitely Afghanistan, and I think a lot of focuses on like 2 days in Afghanistan where we lost a few blokes, and so you can go. So I'm not going to go there.
That's right, no problem.
Okay, yeah, and
so it would kind of go back to those few things, and you were having those flashbacks at the bank, and you were like, wait a second, something's up here.
Yeah.
And the bank must have been like, what the hell, Jake's not, he's not doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, could they have sacked you, or they have to be very careful about that?
Well, we parted company in the end. Okay. I mean, they realised that I couldn't do my job because, obviously, another way I can like explain like PTSD is, it's like using the analogy of a computer CPU. It's processing unit. So, you got like maybe not on a Mac, but on a PC, you've got antivirus software, and this can slow the computer down. It's like this background process, which is running in the background, and it's using up all this memory, all this processing power, and that's what I know PTSD to be.
Okay.
The brain is like subconscious, is constantly like trying to come to terms with these sort of gargantuan, like quarantined memories.
Okay.
And that's taken up, and that's slowing down the rest of your brain. So that means you've got problems with working memory, like concentration, and then basically when you go back to a bank and you've got people reeling off these acronyms of like trading systems at you, handling complex information is, from my experience, just a joke. I mean, you're literally just like a blank, and you just like, I've got no idea what this person is like saying to me. It actually reached a point where I could read on my monitor this like business document, and I could read all the individual words, and they would make sense as individual English words, but I couldn't piece the words together into a coherent like sentence. So I just end up reading the same sentence over and over again, and then the fact that I was doing that was like stressing me out. And then that's when this sort of grey fog would come down, and then sort of stabbing out of that would come the memories, and but there's also like physical symptoms as well, is because obviously the mind's connected like to the body. The mind rules the body, and so I would have sort of like stabbing headaches that would come, and I'll be brutally honest now, as I've been in the book, it affects your guts. Man, like sometimes when I got to go to the loo, I got to go to the loo.
Okay.
I'm okay now, touch wood. But it's a distressing condition, and
the treatment of it when you got back. So you raised your hand and you're like, okay, something's not right here. Can you go to the Army doctors and just be like, what's up? What did they do?
Yeah. Well, originally I tried getting treatment through my company's like private healthcare system, but they told me that they wouldn't fund treatment because my condition was caused by war. So it's like any kind of insurance company. If your car is destroyed by war, they won't pay for your car. Okay. So I had the same thing with my PTSD, which is kind of fair enough anyway. But,
I understand that.
Yeah.
As cold as it is, I understand that.
Yeah. And but then I put my hand up with the Army because I wanted to get better, and I did get very good treatment with the Army. Very good treatment, and ultimately,
what was that treatment?
It was a load of things like CBT, like trying to talk about the trauma and like forcing the brain to process it. Right,
cognitive behavior therapy. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we tried things called EMDR, which is, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's moving your eyes, and it's trying to access different parts of the brain. And there's emotional freedom techniques as well we tried. And I think all these techniques, they can and do work for a lot of guys and girls. They just haven't worked for me yet.
Any medication? They must have been handing you pills left and right.
Oh, I'm on medication now.
Okay.
It's there's stuff called metazapine. I'm on the maximum dosage of that. So that's a kind of antidepressant and anti-anxiety drug. So
have you found certain things worked, certain things didn't work for you?
I mean, all the treatment I got, I know it was really good treatment, and I know my Army psychologist was doing an awesome job, but it was just, I don't know whether I wasn't ready or it was too raw, but it just hasn't worked just yet, but I regard that as my failing, and not my psychologist.
The kind of the cognitive techniques, those haven't worked as much for you, but the medication has done something.
Well, I don't know how I'd be if I wasn't taking it.
So you've been on that for 3 or 4 years, or
Yeah.
okay, and it's just that one medication that you found that works, and you're sticking with that.
I was prescribed that, and I think I was on a lower dosage, but then I reached a sort of nadir a couple of years ago where I ended up being hospitalised because I was a danger to myself, and it was after that hospital stay that the dosage was upped, so I can only imagine it's helping.
Okay, so they put you in hospital for a while, but they didn't. Did they ever put you like in an institution for a couple of weeks where they watch you and
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No, it's like all these.
It wasn't a padded cell or anything. Not
Okay.
a straight jacket. I was just like entry level.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
I'm just trying to get people an idea that haven't read the book, just because you don't come out with a lot of details. You actually hold a lot of details back, and so I think it's hard for people to know.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's
right.
okay, but
Yeah.
it's like the stuff that happened in Helmand, we don't have to go there. But I think people don't understand that it was pretty serious, and obviously, the medication and all that stuff was pretty serious too. So I'm just trying to get people to have an idea.
I can give most of my issues with Afghanistan is almost what's driving my PTSD. I think is guilt. It's guilt in 2 parts. I feel one of the classic PTSD symptoms. There's something called survivor guilt, where you feel guilty for having survived, where some of your buddies didn't, and I feel guilt also over a killing. There you go, and I'm not proud of it. But again, I'm not asking for any sympathy. I don't deserve any. But it's just something that I need to come to terms with, and
Is this an
almost make amends for.
An enemy that was killed, or someone in your
I feel
platoon?
a survivor guilt over the guys, British guys who were killed alongside me, as well as an Afghan army guy that I tried to help, but he died. And then, but then there's a guilt over the killing that I did of Taliban. And some viewers might go, well, the Taliban, what's it matter? But the Taliban are, the briefing we had, before we went to Afghanistan, they were split into 3 groups, Tier 1, 2 and 3. And Tier 1 was described as your kind of Al-Qaeda types. What other people would deem fanatics. Okay. Tier 2 is your kind of bog standard, Taliban, warlords, that kind of thing, people acting full warlords. And then Tier 3, the lowest tier, almost like the TA of the Taliban world, okay, is your what's called $10 Taliban, and they're basically farmers in the fields who the Taliban walk up to. I give them $10, which is a lot of money out there. And I'll give them an AK as well, a Kalashnikov, and then say, right, I want you to shoot that, shoot those British soldiers over there. And I think if I was an Afghan farmer and all I knew was what my relatives had told me about the British, as in the British just come to Afghanistan, to take what they want, and then they fuck off without giving you anything. That's the oral history being passed down. If that was all I knew, and there was these infidels over there blowing things up, you know what? I could easily see myself as being $10 Taliban, and also these guys are just like farmers, so I mean I can just about talk about this, but I'm not going to talk about our guys that were killed. But the first time I ever fired rounds in anger, which is a counterintuitive phrase, you never fire rounds in anger. hardly ever. It's very cold, like clinical action. You have to very precisely aim, and you can't do that if you're angry. Clearly, you know. But the first rounds I fired, for real, I was on top of a hill, and I was firing a 50 caliber, like a heavy machine gun, big thing on a tripod, and like 4 Taliban. I ran into the compound down, you know, below, and myself and the lad next to me, we were putting down suppressing fire on this compound, you know, to keep them pinned in place. So an airstrike could be brought down on them. And I remember, you know, deliberately firing bursts of fire through, you know, the doorway to stop anyone escaping through that doorway, you know, to the compound. And I remember walking rounds along, you know, the front wall, because I thought, oh, they might be trying to climb the walls to escape. I remember thinking, right, I'm going to shut off all these ways for them to escape their terrifying predicament. And all we're doing is just keeping them holed up there for what happened next, which is 2 F-15s come in, strafing run, 500-pound bomb, followed by another one. And we had guys listening to Taliban radio, and with interpreters, and there was later that evening, I went to one of the interpreters, one of the guys working with the interpreters called me over, and he said, "Oh, you might want to take a look at our logbook." I'm like, okay. So by flickering candlelight, I read this radio conversation, and it was from one of the guys in that compound, and he was radioing his Taliban superior, and the interpreter had written down that he was basically asking, for help. And also the interpreter could tell that this guy was crying. He was in tears, and he sounded injured as well. Anyway, no one helped him, and the next day, we heard from the locals that 4 men had died in that compound, 3 from blast injuries, which would be from the bombs, and one had died from bullet wounds. And through process of elimination, I think it's perhaps probable that it was either myself or the guy next to me who had shot this guy, and that was probably the guy on the radio, because the guy killed by the bombs wouldn't be able to talk. They were just shredded. Right. And I know this guy's name, Mustafa. And it's when in modern war you're often firing at targets which are a fair distance away. Not always, but sometimes, and it's all too easy for your enemy to be dehumanized objects in scopes and rangefinders. But on my very first engagement, all of a sudden I had a guy's name, and I knew he was terrified. I knew he bled to death alone at night, and for all I knew, he was just a local farmer, handed $10. I don't know, but there's a 50-50 chance that I did that. And again, I'm not asking for any sympathy or anything like that, because I made the conscious decision, to go to Afghanistan and I got to live with that, and I've got to try and like process that memory among a host of others in the book, and try and do something like constructive with the rest of my life.
To kind of pay back for that is what you're...
That's part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the life like being a famous author? That's what I want to know.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm famous. The book's only been out a month, but it's doing okay, which is really nice, because I hope, I didn't write it as an ego trip. I mean, I'm very honest about my own thoughts and feelings in there, and a lot of people disagree with them, which is like, completely their right. But it's as for the experience of like being an author now and being on like shows like this, like thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no.
It actually feels quite nice now, because it's not soldering and it's not banking, and I just hope that I can do something constructive now, and like speaking to you guys now, that's part of that. If I can, I just like to raise awareness of what PTSD is for a lot of other soldiers who may be like suffering in silence, and if I can play a small part in doing that, then
I think this will. Cool. I'm really curious to what Matt thinks about this interview. I've known Matt for a few years.
I'm just slightly stunned, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of
no, don't be
absorbed.
But so for people that don't know Matt, I mean, I've trained with Matt for a few years, and Matt is, I would say, fascinated by the military. You considered joining the Foreign Legion back in the day.
Yeah, all my life I wanted to join an army and be part of it all. I do sometimes regret that I didn't.
There's a dark flip side. There's a dark flip side though, so I don't regret it too much.
Yeah, and I just want to, you were talking about, you've even been to some recruitment centers in London over the years, and I just want to know, what you think of this, because obviously a lot of times we see the glorified version of war, we see the video games, we see the movies, which, except for a very few exceptions, are, 98%, the glory of the war, I would say.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts, Matt?
I went to 2 recruit centers. One was a Royal Marine recruit center in Houston. One was in the Paras in Trafalgar Square. I don't think it's there anymore. You walk in there, and obviously they're very pro to get you in. There is nothing negative of Army. It's just, they know you want to be a para. They're like, okay, come to us. Yeah. Our guys are the best, Yeah. And there isn't really that much, for somebody who's pretty much gung-ho over their life and they want to be part of this. People don't look at the negative sides, and maybe young guys should listen to stories like this a bit more often before they even think of war. My grandfather spoke of war. He was 17 when he got taken by the Russians when they were kind of liberating Slovakia and up towards Berlin. So, every time I tried to get something out of him, you could see the disorders over there, or the shell shock back then, whatever it was. But it was pretty heavy. He broke down most of the times crying. I had some of it on the camera because I used to always try to get it out of him. Tell me more. But it was heavy, A lot of times I wouldn't get much out of him. That was trench kind of. Whistle would get blown. He would run. He would say in those days he would survive by playing dead. That was his tactics of surviving. He would just duck down and wait for the night to come and then crawl back to the hole. Next day it would be the same thing because it was a Slovakian. They would give him another chance, I guess. So it was heavy duty stuff, and back then I don't think there was any post-treatment for him, for instance, drinking most of his life. And it was kind of swept to the side, and it's great that things like this happen where people kind of care about these things and speak about it, first of all, because the old generation, that was kind of swept under the rug, I guess.
It just wasn't talked about. My grandfather, he I think fair play, like to your grandfather, for like trying to talk about it, because I think with previous generations, it has just been like something that is not talked about, it wasn't called PTSD back then, but this kind of this human, normal reaction, for some people, to abnormal events. It's been documented through history. The ancient Greeks and Romans talked about it. They didn't call it PTSD, but they were describing symptoms which are part of the PTSD, diagnostic criteria. And the American Civil War, they talked of a condition called soldier's heart. Again, you read the symptoms, you're like, well, that's PTSD, isn't it? And then with First World War, obviously, it was like shell shock, and gradually through the 20th century, it's been slowly gathering acceptance. But I think fair play to your grandfather for trying to talk about it, because my grandfather, nothing against him, like God rest his soul, but his way of coping was just to never talk about it, ever. Never talked about it.
Right.
I kind of found him a lot of times just get really angry with me just for asking, So he would tell me, some days he would be in better mood, or he would just kind of tell me a sentence or two. Some days I could see that he just zoned it out, and he just kind of, you'd be like waving your hand in front of his face, and he'd just be in a different state, But you just wouldn't get much out of him, and it was like sometimes you just get really angry at me, why am I bringing this crap out, and kind of, anger, a lot of anger.
Completely understandable way of trying to deal with that if you have no other education of how to do it differently, right? Or self-medicate. I mean, we see Vietnam vets and heroin addiction. Of course, maybe that's because it was over there as well. Or drinking. I'm sure you medicated with alcohol on many occasions.
I'm self-medicating with this at the moment.
It's a cigarette pen just for the future. So any guys coming on London Real, you're not allowed to smoke.
Yeah. Well, there's no smoke, only vapor.
Only vapor. We made an exception for Jake.
Thank you.
But Britain's such a crazy place because it's a nation that's just defined by war. I mean, you walk down the street and you can't not see a memorial to World War I or World War II or the Crimean Wars or this, and it's such a dense country that it's like, it's always with you, more so than America for me.
Really?
Oh,
Okay.
Definitely, because you don't bump into it, because you don't bump into a memorial people in San Diego that died from World War II, you just don't. But in Britain, no, you just don't. And we haven't had the casualties. I just don't think we had the country that's steeped in that much history of war. But here, it's just like the memorials, and they keep going up. There's a new one for the airmen in just off Hyde Park.
Is that the Battle of Britain one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, which is a stunning and powerful monument. But it must do your head in too, and put like lots of pressure on people to serve. And or is that just the definition of a country?
I don't know. I think I'm. It's one of the aspects of my country that I like, because I think because I still revere the guys who fought in the world wars, and but I think I do it all the more now because I know how some of them will have suffered, and I'm not comparing Afghanistan or Iraq to World War I or World War II.
Well, why not though?
There wasn't the same level of casualties, but I think some of your viewers may go, well, there's no way you can compare them. It wasn't trench warfare, and there was no kind of mass battles like that. But what for the soldier on the ground, I want someone's shooting at him. I want someone is actively doing everything in their power to kill you, and you have to try and return the favour. It doesn't really matter what theatre of war you're in. It's still a life and death struggle. And
so it's not necessarily a quantity of incidents or a cumulative nature of incidents. You don't have to see 1,000 people die. It can be enough to see one or two.
Yeah, I think some people get PTSD from a single incident. And not just in military life, it could be like a car accident, or seeing a car accident where someone's killed or something. It's a very natural reaction to abnormal events in some people, and so when I was in Afghanistan, there weren't any kind of massed battles. There was no kind of trench warfare or anything as extreme as that, but at times we were we were fighting every single day, and that can take its toll mentally afterwards, in my experience, and also obviously physically for a lot of guys as well, whether they're killed or injured.
Because actually maiming and disability and that kind
Absolutely,
of thing.
yeah, quite. And I know we haven't talked about the physical injuries in this interview. I mean, it's more about the mental side of things, so I don't want to take anything away from the guys who've been physically injured, but obviously this interview is about the mental side of
Just
things.
back to that cumulative thing. Do you think if you hadn't have done that tour in 03 and 05 in Iraq, that your condition would be less severe now or different?
I don't know, $1 million question, but I think it might still be the same. I know a psychiatrist who wrote a report on me, and I remember him documenting and afterwards me being aware. I was like, oh yeah, okay. All my flashbacks and the nightmares and that kind of stuff, they're all to do with Afghanistan. Iraq doesn't really feature so much. Whether it was a cumulative wearing away at my mental defences over a number of years, I just don't know. But I know that all the flashbacks and stuff, they're definitely from Afghanistan.
Okay.
I
want to address this issue. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you've addressed it, and I think we should talk about it. You had one critic in a really bad review on Amazon, a guy that was, I think, refuting some of the things you say or the accuracy of your information. You released some footage from your helmet cam, which I want to ask you about later. I didn't even know if you could keep that stuff. That I think you were just showing for some of the situations you were in. You refused to release other footage that I think had the dying of a couple people that were in your unit. Who is this guy? Do you care? Do you feel like you do need to refute this because you're in the public eye? What's going on?
He was a guy in a unit I was attached to for my Afghanistan tour. We were in the same barracks, together, whilst we were doing the pre-deployment training. But when we went to Afghanistan, we were in different teams. Our teams were in different areas of the country. So I was stationed at a place called Kajaki, and then later in the Sangin Valley at a patrol base called Fob Inkerman. This other chap wasn't there. So when he accused me of lying and exaggerating my Afghan service, I didn't see that I had any other option at that point other than to post my helmet cam footage online as proof of my service. But obviously, the bits where our guys are being, you don't see any of our guys being killed, because I owe them and their families that and a whole shed load more. But this chap, I wish him well, and I'm not just saying that. I can understand that he felt that I had slighted his unit with the pre-deployment training that we had.
Did you say they weren't competent or they weren't doing things right?
No, they weren't incompetent at all. No.
How did you slight them then?
No, it was more, maybe I wasn't in a position to, but I mean at that time I was comparing the pre-deployment training in that unit with the unit that we were originally meant to go on tour with, and the pace of training was very different, and it was I found it I think this may be like my perspective as a TA soldier. When you do like training, it tends to be very intensive and like frenetic, because you could be training at a weekend or in 1-2 week period, so you have to cram as much training as you can into that time period. And so I think perhaps I got used to that intensity, and I was aware that we were going to war, and coming from a specialist TA unit, and then being like posted to a specialist regular unit who we were originally meant to go on tour with, I was used to this intensity of training, and we were literally training all the hours of every single day, and then our weekends were, I felt they were earned, it's just my opinion, but I didn't feel that same intensity when I went to this man's unit.
Okay.
But also, I think I just wish that he could read the rest of the book.
Okay, so he saw that part and kind
because
of reacted.
My opinion changes profoundly and very positively about his unit, and I wish he could read the context and know that I slag myself off as much as I might be like critical of a unit at one particular time.
What do your fellow soldiers say now to you? Can you find any solace with them, or can they console you? Do they have the same issues you have? Do you ever even get to talk to them?
Oh yeah. I think my second Iraq tour, that was the HSC. It was an HSC deployment.
Okay.
So
I meant now, really. I meant in the last few years, like
that's
after this has happened.
No, I'm still very, very good friends with all the guys I served on that tour with.
Okay.
And especially the guys in my team. I mean, I'm godfather to one of the guys' daughters now,
Okay.
and actually like staying with me now. I think that's, and I'm good friends with some of the guys that I went to Afghan with as well, and I think that's very, very important, especially as a TA soldier, because as a regular soldier, you'll do your tour as a unit, and you'll come back as a unit, and you'll decompress.
This is a very important point you're making here.
Okay.
No, you go.
Okay.
So please.
You'll decompress, together, to use like deep sea diving parlance. So you do the tour as a unit, you come back as a unit, and over the days, weeks, months, and then years that you're back, you'll stay in that barracks life, in that barracks environment. You'll stay in that military environment, and you will gradually come down as a unit. You'll decompress, together with the guys that you were on tour with, and this is gradual sort of come down, this sort of, like blurring into, normality back here. As a TA soldier, as a reservist soldier, you'll never have that. You don't have that. I mean, you'll literally one day you'll be in Afghanistan. As they fly you back, you might get like 36 hours in like Cyprus, which they call decompression, which is a nice gesture. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're back home. You have a few weeks leave, and then after those few weeks leave, you could find yourself like sitting at a desk in Canary Wharf, say, wherever it is, like surrounded by people who, through no fault of their own, have not the faintest idea of what you've just been like doing or like seeing or experiencing, and that is, that can be an incredibly isolating experience.
That just sounds nuts to me. That whole like night
was
and
nuts.
day, and black and white,
Yeah.
and like you said, to no fault of their own. But you're sitting down next to these people that have been Canary Wharf the whole time, and they are literally like, who the fuck are you? And they probably even have this weird kind of animosity towards you because they don't understand you. And then
Yeah. You get it was weird coming back because I mean, literally, you walk through those like glass doors or whatever, and you walk up to your old desk. Very, very surreal, almost like an out-of-body experience, and then you sit down and then okay, you would realise that the only thing that has changed here is me. And I remember being asked, from guys from other teams, to say, how long have you been away, Jake? 6 months, is it? I've been away for, over a year. And that was terrifying to me because they lost track of time whilst they're doing this 9 to 5 existence. And that was frightening, all of a sudden, having to embrace this, from my perspective at that time, like grey existence all over again, and to be lost within it. And so I could understand like some of the questions I got, because it was almost like an insight into this world they'd only ever seen on TV or whatever, or read about in the newspapers. So there was the inevitable, so what was it like question, which is impossible to answer because it's so kind of open-ended, and it's like, well, hot. It was hot. What do you want to know? But then, of course, you get, at the opposite end of the spectrum, like someone like drilling down and saying, something like, and I can't blame them too much because they didn't really understand too much what they were asking. But I mean, I remember being asked in a kind of like semi-job interview, so what was the worst thing you ever saw? Tell me about it. I was just like, man, what, in a job interview? Really? Or of course you get the other one, which is just, so, did you kill anyone? Which is, it might be on people's minds, but it's often the worst thing you can ask a soldier when he's back from tour because, even if you haven't seen the whites of their eyes or anything like that, it's still a very, very personal question, and it's.
How could you ask that question? It just pisses me off. I was reading in the book when some of the guys are the alpha males in the group, and they're all, I don't know, messing with you or asking you bullshit questions like that. It just made me really angry. Like just to ask a loaded question like that. It seems like for me, I would just be like, don't even ask me that, or you don't even have the right to ask me that. That's the feeling I think I would get, if I had just come back from that.
It's on. Yeah, actually, that's actually pretty. Yeah, it's
kind of
a really good way of looking at
isn't it? It's just like
yeah, thank you. Yeah, you guys are in tune. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's almost, you can almost understand them asking it, but it's almost like they don't know exactly what they're asking, because if they could know exactly what it was that they were asking, they wouldn't answer. They wouldn't ask a question in the first place, because if you've, this is assuming you've got any attached emotion, like to your killing, which is a whole other thing. But assuming you have got some repressed and like buried deep down inside about it, it's not the question you want to be asked like first thing when you sit down at your desk. No. As you get back.
I think also in the banking,
it's not exactly welcome home.
No, and I also think in the banking industry there's a lot of posturing and a lot of
yes.
Alphaing and bullying, and I think maybe they don't even know, but I bet just your presence there makes them uncomfortable, because you're a reminder that they're not doing that job, that they would never be able to do that job. Maybe they would be scared to do that job, and maybe subconsciously they find some tension with you, in a little bit of defense of them, and maybe some of it's just ignorance, too.
Yeah, might be. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, okay.
I think probably some of it's just passive aggressiveness, because it's in the city you compete with each other by bonuses, or who's got the Ferrari and who's got this, but they can't really get one up on Jake, who's just come back from Helmand. It's like, I can't.
Actually, you know what? I kind of remember that now. I remember a guy asking me in this really kind of flippant offhand way. So did he get any good kills? Yeah, but we said it in such a way that it was almost like not a challenge. Yeah, it was almost like a challenge in a way, and I just refused to answer the question, like pretty much, doing what I'm doing now, just looking away.
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of belittle what you did, make you feel kind of bad, make him still feel all right, and move on.
It's interesting to hear that psychology, though.
Yeah, it's just a way. I think it's a way of them dealing with the situation, because, seriously, you're such a. I was in that industry, and you don't really get many people like you that have just walked back from a situation. We can deal with all the other guys. We can deal with the up-and-coming guy. I can deal with the Oxford grad because he's just a bookworm. I can deal with the East Ender guy because he doesn't know shit. I make my money. I can deal with. But when you're like a a fluke, you know, when you come in the office.
Right.
So I'm sure you had a lot
freak.
of reactions. Not like a freak like that, like a
That's
wild.
my word, not yours. No.
Yeah, like a wild card. Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, I don't know what to say about Jake. I can't really, you know, do all these other things. But anyways, that's just.
Well, not too many guys have been there, so you know that's why I guess you're used to everything else, right?
Yeah.
You don't have too many soldiers coming in, you know, so
Well, I noticed
that's going to be a bit different.
pretty much the questions lasted half a day, and then there was nothing more.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was just business about the usual. But of course, if you have PTSD, it's never back to business as usual.
I think it's weirder sometimes when they don't ask. You know, I mean, this is a horrible
that can
comparison, but I used to train some mixed martial arts, and sometimes I'd come to work with a big black eye, and a lot of people wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't ask me about my eye. They'd be like, "Hi, Brian," and I'd be like, "Hi," and they'd be like, "How's your weekend?" "It's fine." No one would ask me about my black eye, and it made it worse. And I'm just wondering if for sometimes it was just worse when people wouldn't talk to you about it, or if they would ignore you.
It was like an elephant in the room kind of
Yeah,
thing.
like
It's,
almost like we better not talk to Jake about that.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'd rather have that than the questions like did he kill anyone?
Okay, those kind of.
But
pinky
then,
questions.
I can understand that some people's awkwardness when they don't know what to ask because, through no fault of their own, they haven't got life experience. And with some people, I have noticed that they're trying to find the right thing to ask or like say, and that's where I try and help them out now, and I've been taught to try and talk about things, to open up, and that way you can try and process it. So I try and help them out now if they're well-meaning.
I think people just don't know how to deal with a soldier. And you should have seen some of the questions I got. They're like, ask him if the war was terrorism or capitalism. Ask him what it's like to be paid to kill people. But I don't think any of those people, if they sat down with you for the last hour, I mean, those are silly questions to ask you. But by what you've just told us, because they're just so not relevant. But
They're completely irrelevant.
Yeah, they're just not relevant to your experience. In my
It might
opinion.
form part of your. Before you go, you might entertain questions like that as you try to justify or not why you're going there. Why you might soon die or be worse, be maimed. Why you might have to kill, but once you're actually out there, you're not thinking about this stuff at all. You're just thinking about your kit, your mate next to you, and then when you're out on patrol, you just got your head on a swivel, watching out for Taliban, and that's there's a very simple black and white existence, and at times the soldiers will relate to this. I miss it so, which sounds, there's part of me which misses it. And there's another part of me which it's in direct conflict with that, which is like, that's the last place I ever want to go back to in my whole fucking life. And there's a real kind of dichotomy there, and there's a juxtaposition of, I haven't got a split personality or anything, but there's a lot of conflict.
Oh, that makes sense. Do you worry that people see you as a vet and they just do this kind of hero worship thing, like you saw it with the firefighters that went into the World Trade Center, and everyone just says they must be good people because they did these great things.
Right. Okay.
And then you come back and you're like, I'm actually just this really flawed dude that's got my own problems. I wasn't a hero, but people want to prop you up. Hell, maybe even we're doing it in this interview by like saying, and do you dislike that, or how do you deal with that whole kind of hero worship thing?
We don't get it so much in this country.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I've really seen in contrast. Contrasting like public attitude, like general public attitude, like to soldiers, to veterans in here, like compared to in America, and I don't know if in America it's a hang up from. The Vietnam vets being not treated very well.
Could be.
I don't know. Maybe it's that, like combined with 9/11 and this great sort of
Stir of patriotism.
and
15 years.
This country hasn't been attacked on a scale like 9/11 since the Second World War.
Yeah.
and I think I can only try to understand the impact that would have on a national psyche, an attack like that. And the times I've been to America, I mean, I went to America pretty much immediately after coming back from Afghanistan, like during my leave, before going back to work, and I was struck by the fantastic support that the American veterans get, and even as British veterans, we were told, just show your military ID and you'll get forces discounts here, there, and everywhere. And fuck me, we did. And even went in bars and it'd be we'd have rounds bought for us, and I've never had that in this country, and I'm not asking for it either. I'm not asking for sympathy or anything like that, but it was interesting to see the contrast of public support. And I think in this country, well, just from my experience anyway, as a veteran, I've never been spat on or killed a baby killer or anything like that. Although online I've seen a few comments on the Daily Mail article, and it's interesting, but from my experience, there's been this feeling of almost being just overlooked by this celebrity culture, where, I mean, for instance, if you take that Daily Mail article, okay, so the Daily Mail, they wrote an article about my book, and then, I read about it there, and then all along the entire right-hand page, all the way down, and almost, beyond, the end of my article, was all just stories about, celebrities, who's wearing what, who's split up with who, what Paris Hilton have for breakfast, whatever it is, and that's, there can be this feeling of just being overlooked by things that don't actually mean anything. It's this sort of, just seem vacuous, this celebrity culture. And I can remember sitting on the tube, and after I got back from Afghan, and there was a man beside me reading the paper. I'm not sure which one it was, and he was flicking through it, and then all of a sudden, I saw a picture of a guy's face that he's called Dave Hicks, and he was our company commander, and he was killed, and I saw his face in the paper. It's just and I recognised that photo because I was only yards away from him when it was taken, and but I didn't have a chance to sort of covertly read anything it said about him, because the chap just, I looked at this picture of an unknown soldier, I flicked it over, and then just absorbed himself in the celebrity news about whose boyfriend had just overdosed and all this kind of stuff, and I know in this country there's a lot of people who are supportive, and I can't speak for all servicemen, but I will say that we are grateful for that. But an awful lot of people couldn't give a shit.
Okay.
They could not give a shit. Okay. Honestly, and they might pay lip service, but they'll be more interested in what's happening in Big Brother, or wherever it is.
Are they ready for this book? I mean, is in 2013, are people ready to read this book, you think, in the US or the UK?
I hope so. It's up to them whether they read it. I mean, like I say, I'm not going to force it down anyone's throat, but I hope that people can maybe read it, and I've had to confront my flaws as a person in it. We all have our flaws, but also I hope that people can read it and hopefully respect it like for its honesty, and then hopefully learn about what so many more soldiers apart from me are actually going through at the moment with PTSD. And like I said, we live among you now, and our numbers are growing, and I wanted to give these people a semblance of a voice. I mean, just in increasing awareness about PTSD.
What would be your one goal from this book, if you could just have one? Would it be that you guys get that the PTSD survivors get the respect from the public, or get the awareness, or is it more than that?
I feel uncomfortable asking. I know I was talking about celebrity culture earlier, and I feel uncomfortable asking for respect because it's almost like demanding it, and you can never do that.
No, but you wrote this book, and this is a statement you're making.
Yeah.
So you must want something, ideally, some kind of outcome.
It's just a statement of honest opinion, of my opinion, and it's a statement of fact about what from my view the reality is out on the ground out there, and what the psychological repercussions can be when you come home. And if I could achieve one thing, it would just be playing my very small part in telling people who that guy sitting on the train beside him, he could be like someone like me who is suffering in silence.
Fair enough. Have you considered some of these? That we're actually having a doctor here on Friday who specializes in doing research with MDMA and psilocybin mushrooms for a lot of the brain, and for people suffering from PTSD and stuff like that. And I was just wondering if it's something you've ever considered, because it's something we talk a lot about on this show. The benefits of psychedelics, that kind of thing. Have you ever considered something like that for you?
Taking drugs? Yeah.
Well, okay, we could call, I guess, it a drug, but taking, say, an MDMA or a psychedelic substance to, I don't know, potentially confront some of those places in your brain that, like you say, have been shut down.
I haven't considered it, and I wouldn't, because I don't want to start going down any kind of slippery slopes. Some guys and girls, they can self-medicate, to try and take the pain away.
Yeah.
And this involves alcohol, drugs, even smoking, and this is my new, and so I'd be, just personally speaking for me, I'll be wary about going down a route like that, because it might well take away the pain, but then I would be thinking, oh, okay, I'll just take this again, and that'll take the pain away again. I don't want to be a drug addict.
Well, and I respect that, but I am going to send you a couple of our previous episodes, because
okay.
Some of these substances, some people can call them drugs, but they're actually medicines.
I'm sure I don't know them very well.
That's okay.
Yeah.
One of them I would suggest you look into is ayahuasca, which is something that's drank in the jungles of Peru, and there is nothing fun or escapist about it. As a matter of fact, it usually makes you confront certain things about yourself that you're not going to do in normal consciousness. And I would say it's not escapism by any means. And matter of fact, what it does more is makes you confront a lot of things in your life. And it's something that I experienced last year, as Matthew knows. And in some ways, it made me get more comfortable with my own consciousness, and in some ways eradicated some of my own abusive behaviors that are probably pent up from my own bad memories of the past. Yeah. So it's just something that I'm going to be sending you a few articles about, but definitely look into, because
I'll read it, Brian. Thank you.
Some of these psychedelic substances they are being used, and even MDMA they're finding being used in some therapeutic ways, because they're a way of just promoting some of these feelings in some people with some traumatic experiences, not as an escapism, but as a way of potentially therapeutically getting them back. I'm not convinced with the MDMA research, but I do think that the psychedelics have something there.
It's interesting about the effect you're talking about there, where it's actually forcing your brain to confront things that otherwise you wouldn't normally consciously be feeling, because that sounds an awful lot like CBT and exposure therapy, where the theory is to try and confront these experiences in your brain like consciously, and thereby like process them, and thereby again lessening their impact. So
for me, it seems so clear that if you don't confront these things in your brain, then your brain and your body will presume these behaviors that find a workaround, whether it's whether it's substance abuse or not confronting certain situations or being hyper aware. And that ultimately you're going to have to try to confront these things. And my ayahuasca shaman, she has a group of heroin addicts that she works with. She has a group of cancer patients that are trying to deal with their own mortality that she deals with. She's got a whole set of people that have been sexually abused in their childhood. And these sessions are all about them dealing with these memories that they can't find any other way to access, because there's only so much, as I'm sure you know, cognitive behavior. You might be in that chair for 10 years talking about something. Yeah. So anyways, I thought I would just ask you about that and mention it.
Thank you. I'll definitely look at it, because there's one. It's one thing talking about the experience, but then if your brain is shut off all the emotions attached to it, the point of the therapy isn't actually achieving anything. Yeah. You have to tap into the associated emotions, which your brain is locked down, it's locked away. You have to relive them, even though it's the last thing you want to do, to actually get anywhere in therapy. I know the theory.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people get caught up in language, and as soon as you hear a word like MDMA or psilocybin mushrooms, it's like, that's a drug. No. That's what those bad people do over here in the clubs. Okay. Yeah. And it's a shame. As opposed to alcohol is what those intelligent people do in the pubs when they fall over and break themselves. or cigarettes, which is legal. Yeah. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to bring that up.
Fair one. Yeah, I'll read it, Brian.
Yeah, I'll send you that stuff. Matthew, I mean, this has been so interesting, and we got a little bit more time left. My brain's been so fried by this because it's just so much information, Jake. You're so honest. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of questions, but is there anything that you wanted to ask?
I'm just shocked. I'm just kind of absorbed by all this info.
You don't have to ask anything if you don't want to.
Well, how did you get that helmet cam footage? And do they not confiscate it? Are you allowed to take it out? Has the Army, have you had any issues legally with them where they could sue you? Or I just wanted to ask those general questions.
Nothing I'm aware of.
So everyone's allowed to take those pictures and video footage out of...
as far as I'm aware.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
In terms of young guys that want to join the military, is there anything you would advise in terms of maybe researching it a bit more, or things that they should be aware of more?
This is where I don't think the Army will ever use me as a recruiting tool. But I would say it's almost like I could speak to my younger self, and I would ask him or them to just find out as much as they can about the reality, and then to make as much of an informed decision as they possibly can, because but as a young man, for sure, you can be very not gung-ho, but you're young, dumb, and full of cum. You want to, thrusting and all that, and the Army seems like this exciting walk of life, and it is. It is, absolutely. But there's a dark flip side, potentially. And as long as they're aware of that, then okay, cool. I would be the worst of hypocrites, to say don't join the Army. Worst of hypocrites. So I can't say that. I can't say that.
I don't think they necessarily want to be aware of it. You know what I mean? If you want to do this all your life, last thing you want before you go recruit is that you want somebody telling you the negative of war. I kind of felt like since I was a kid that I wanted to join. Yeah. And I felt like my dad kept putting me off by saying, "Go to university for 5 years, then we'll see." And he kept kind of like distancing me from this whole thing. And it's just towards the 30s I started kind of calming down more. But yeah. Even then I felt like I should have done it, or I should have. Or
when you hear Jake talk, does it make you still wish that you had been there? You had had your own experience?
Yeah, in a way, yes. In a way, I do feel like.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. You screwed up.
Thanks.
You screwed everything
No,
up.
I just yeah.
No, but I mean, and that's what's
'Cause
interesting.
I think you just have to experience it. I don't think, that's the negativity of war. But at the same time, you can never say that you've done it. And in a way, no matter how negative it is, it's just it was your dream all your life or whatever, or 10 years of your life or 15, and you never followed that dream. So in a way, you're kind of thinking, shit, why didn't I do it? I do regret it sometimes. And even hearing the negative of it, I do kind of think maybe I should have done it.
I think a warning on the label, just like a smoking warning, might even make a 20-year-old want to do it more.
Yeah.
I mean, like
That's it. Yeah. I mean,
when you're young like that,
yeah.
we know as guys when you're young. I mean, Jesus, man, you just want to.
Before I went to Afghanistan, I remember seeing helmet cam footage of the Paras in Helmand in 2006, and I was just like, I need to be there.
Right.
And it's like this sort of debased siren song calling me, and it was just, it sounds deranged, and again, I'm not making any excuses for myself, but there are an awful lot of young men and women who do feel that way, and it's just the way it is, and the army's never going to, they're never going to employ like someone with PTSD to stand up in front of young recruits and go, actually, this is how it can end up, because that's not a recruiting tool. But it's interesting, to hear you, like saying that, because it's almost, I can relate to it as well, because it's almost like living before dying, and it's no matter, I guess a lot of it's how you're brought up. I was brought up in a military family, and I was drawn to the darkness.
See, my family, every time I spoke about it, my dad would be like, "Are you crazy?" It would be, everybody would be against it. It's, you want to join the military? Don't have a girlfriend. Be single. My family would not give me any support. Your girlfriend would be on top of your back going, "Are you crazy?" as well. So you don't get any support if you don't have that background in your family.
Yeah. There you go.
That's interesting to see your reaction even after this. Makes sense. If people want to see the helmet cam footage, they can come find you on Facebook. It's Jake Wood, Among You is how they find you. Is that right?
Jake Wood, author of Among You. Yeah. I would say that the only reason I posted it on there was to refute allegations of my, quote, lies and exaggerations about my Afghan service. That's the only reason it's on there.
Okay. Do you want people to see it, or is it not really, or is it
well,
not
it's on there now,
relevant?
and people can make of it what they will. There's whole sections of it. Not everything's on there, obviously, because it would be hours long otherwise.
Right.
But there's you'll get snippets of like certain things, and the peace and the noise.
Right.
As well.
Yeah, I saw both of that. Do you want me to put a link on the YouTube video to that, or do you want me to just let people, if they want to find you, they can?
It's entirely up to you.
Okay. No, fair enough. What's next for you? Are you a writer now? Is it? I mean, you pretty much poured your life into one book. So are you going to try to write more in the future, or what's 2013 like for you?
I hope so. I would like to write in the future, because I found that it's something that I can do no matter that I've got PTSD, and I say that because I can write completely at my own pace, and if I have a night full of nightmares, and then the next day I literally cannot work and my brain does not work, which happens commonly, I can take that day off, as it were, like try and restock, and I can write in the times that are good for me. I've got no one breathing down my neck, and I'm hoping that this can be a future for me now, writing, but I think it'll be a little bit of time yet before the next one's published.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I flipped through this just to get more of the facts, more than anything, although I got a feel for it. And there's a lot of things we didn't touch on here. There's some romantic relationships that seem quite key in the storytelling, as you can only imagine it would be. You know, when you're over there, it sounds like you're very emotionally vulnerable from that standpoint.
It's part of the story, and again, it's something that I wanted to talk about because there's this concept called the Dear John letter, which is where essentially soldiers are dumped by their other halves whilst they're on tour, either by phone or email or by a Dear John letter, and I felt that experience needed to be in there. I mean, not just because I wanted to be emotionally honest in the book, but also because I don't think the emotional effect that can have on a soldier whilst he's on tour and facing life and death the next day potentially, I don't think that's been talked about very much as far as I'm aware anyway. And actually, I know Anthony Swafford and Jarhead talked about it a little bit, and I respect him for doing that, because if you're a soldier on tour and if you love your girlfriend, your other half, and if you suspect or imagine that she's being unfaithful, I'm not saying that girl was, then the way that can play on your head, it can plague your head while you're on tour, is not healthy. So I wanted to write about it because I just wanted people to know what the effect of certain actions are, and if a girl dumps a guy on tour, if he loved her, this can be the reaction, the mental reaction. For some guys at least. I'm not saying for all guys, but I mean, it definitely got to me, and it started plaguing my head.
Did you have a particularly low moment when you were in Afghanistan where I watched another interview where I think a young boy pointed a gun at you?
That was in Iraq.
It was in Iraq.
Yeah.
Was that, and I mean, we're almost done, but I was wondering if you could just tell us just roughly what was going through your head and how you were feeling, and were you having issues with a woman as well?
Yeah, that happened a few days after that relationship ended, and
in a Dear John type of way, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was probably made worse by the fact that this, the girl I was going out with that time, she was the first girl that I've ever truly loved. So it's like losing your first love when she's thousands of miles away and there's nothing you can do about it, and you just have to accept, you just have to take what's given to you. And because she was my first love, I think it hit me hard, and I found myself in a bunker that night with a pistol under my chin, and I had a moment I was like, what the hell are you doing? Because it can, it's, I thought about my family and my mum and my dad and my brother in that moment. I thought I can't do this to them, and I thought about my friends, actually in Iraq with me. I mean, they'd have to clear up the mess.
This is a pistol on your chin as in a suicide attempt and thoughts. And
so I didn't do that. But then just a couple of days after that, we were on patrol, which is the incident you're talking about, and I was doing top cover on the back of a Snatch, and which is a armoured Land Rover. So I was standing on the back of that, and we pulled up to a traffic junction, and our vehicles are trying to edge their way through the traffic there. I'm on the back of the rear vehicle, so I'm covering sides and rear, and you look through your arcs, left to right, near and far, 180 degrees up and down, and you're looking for suspicious bits of rubbish, that kind of thing. I clocked a child beside the vehicle, right beside the vehicle, but in that moment he wasn't a threat or anything, so I was just like, okay, so I checked all around, and just a few seconds later, I looked down and I looked back at him, and he's holding a pistol up and is pointing at my face. And
how old is he?
I think he couldn't have been any more than 8. And yeah, it's just, and he was smiling. And he was smiling as he held this pistol up at my face, and it was literally just from just, you know, like 2 meters away, right below the vehicle, and that's an interesting moment because I could have been, I suppose, by the rules of engagement, I could have been justified in shooting him. But I mean, who the hell wants to kill an 8-year-old boy? I sure as hell didn't. And who wants to kill a little boy? I didn't want to kill a little boy. And no matter if he was holding a pistol up to my face, but also at that moment, I will admit, and again, it's an admission of weakness. But I'm as human as everyone else, and there was a couple of seconds in that standoff as I just eyed him up, I eyed him out, you know, and where I just thought, I'd just do it. No, go on, just do it. You know, just pull the trigger. And so I just stared at him, and I think that freaked him out because I don't know what he was expecting, but I got the impression how I reacted was the last he'd expect me to react, because I could see his hand starting to his little hand starting to shake, and then his smile went, and he looked really distressed, and then all of a sudden my vehicle gunned it, and we're away, and I just looked back and just saw his little figure, just, you know, like arm down by his side, and just getting smaller and smaller, and then our little private moment was gone.
If one of your fellow soldiers saw you, would they have said shoot him, Jake, or would they have just reacted in that way?
I'm sure I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the way I reacted, because I felt that I should have done something. Not shoot him, but I felt that I should have called a halt to the vehicle, called halt. I got out, walked up to him, grabbed the pistol out of his arm, and maybe given him just a slap and a shout at him, because it's a monumentally stupid thing he was doing, because, you know, if it was another soldier, he could have just been shot. But if you take away the fact that he still got the pistol, I think I don't think he'd ever do that again. I just saw the look in his eyes, and I don't think he'd do that again.
I think they need to make a movie about this, Jake. that scene alone would be pretty intense, you know.
A lot of people, a lot of people read the book. They keep on mentioning us, and it's it was almost a defining moment of that tour. I mean, there was a lot leading up to that, and that was almost but that was very near the end of my tour, and it kind of summed up that part of the tour, really.
Yeah, that scene itself says a lot with no words being said.
Yeah.
Between the two of you, Chicks, thanks for your honesty about that stuff and about this whole interview.
No, thank you for listening. You've asked intelligent questions, and it's been as pleasurable as it possibly can be.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you for your patience and your intelligent questions. So thank you.
You know, I said right before, I said let's have fun, but I knew this wasn't going to be a fun one.
Sorry,
but it can't be a fun one because we had to talk about a lot of these things, and I'm still probably leaving stuff out. We are actually giving away 5 copies of your book, are we not?
Yes.
Are they going to be signed copies?
There will be signed copies.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we've got 5 copies of Jake's book that we'll send out to you anywhere in the world. We're going to be basically picking the best quotes that are tweeted from this episode. So it can be a quote probably from Jake, or maybe Matt. I don't think I said anything interesting.
I don't think I said much.
Maybe, but if you take his quote and tweet it and put, of course, our Twitter link, which is at London Real TV, and put the Biddy link or the YouTube URL. We'll send that out. And just tweet that out. We'll be picking the 5 best ones. You'll get a copy of this book. I'm going to go home and reread it. And I'm not joking about the movie rights to that. If someone does want to contact you about the movie rights, how do they get in touch with you? I know you have a Twitter handle, but you use it kind of, right?
Yeah, I've got there's an author's Facebook page, like Jake Wood, author of Among You. They can
message you there.
They can message me there, or get in touch with my publishers, Mainstream Publishing.
Okay.
So
fantastic. Yeah. And also, I'm going to say that if you do get a book sent to you by Jake Wood, go to Amazon and leave him a review. For authors, that's gold, isn't it?
Well, thank you. Okay, well, yeah, it's very nice when people do, like say they like it, and as I said, I can understand that one review is, I can understand where he's coming from, so I don't condemn him for, his views as. And I hope one day that hopefully he can appreciate my emotional honesty as much as I respect his position. So, but having said that, I'm deeply grateful. I'm deeply grateful for the people who have read the book and liked it and left such, in some cases, beautiful reviews. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you addressed him and put the footage up, and at least you addressed what he said. I think that's an intelligent way of doing it. And anyone who might be listening on iTunes, if you want to watch this on YouTube, you can see, a lot of this interview, Jake's been, reliving a lot of these memories, and he's obviously very sincere and sometimes uncomfortable, and I know this hasn't been the easiest 2 hours for you.
It's okay. It's okay because I think the bits I relived are the bits that don't come back.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there's, but obviously I have written about those bits in the book, and their effect on me. So you guys did good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a fine line. I want to find the details, but I don't want to push for pushing's sake. Like you said, that footage being played over on the radio, I think that's pushing it a bit too far. So
it was an interesting experience. Well, at least it brought it home, like to the listeners, which I'm guessing it's why they did it.
Yeah.
I don't think they did that to freak me out. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I just didn't want to interrupt too much. I was absorbed by your story.
I find the best shows we have here is when I just shut the fuck up and listen. So I've done a lot of that today. So that's awesome. Matt, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I know it can be difficult because I yap a lot. But thanks for being here, and you have a unique perspective. That's why I wanted you here, because you always tell me about all this military stuff all the time. So I was glad for you just to see this. And tweet those quotes out. We'll send those books. You guys know how to find us on Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. Jake, please stay in touch with us. Wish you all the best with this book.
Thank you.
I really like it, and I see a lot of nonsense. So
okay, thank you very much.
And thanks for coming on the show.
My
pleasure. Thank you, guys.
All right, until then, guys, it's about the journey.
For the journey.
All right, peace.
Welcome to London.
Nothing sadder than seeing that great fighter just go that 1 or 2 fights too many, and ruin their legacy. I mean, we've talked about like Sakuraba and people like that before, and it's just a sad thing to see. So maybe it's great that now we're going to remember Kenny Florian as being a great contender, and then still